Hi, my name is Thomas Gebauer. My presentation is on brand coolness. Speakers for today's webinar was Rajiv Batra with the help of Caleb Warren, Richard Bogozzi, and Sandra Loureiro. And they studied to find what attributes make a brand considered cool nowadays to consumers. During certain periods of time, brands can go from being seen as cool in the eyes of consumers to being seen as uncool and vice versa. In one example, Facebook was very popular to consumers back in the 2000s when people used to think Facebook was cool. But as time progressed, people started moving over to Instagram as the new cool social media app and saw Facebook as more of like a older generation social media app. The webinar defines coolness as a subjective and dynamic, socially constructive, positive trait attributed to cultural objects inferred to be appropriately anonymous. And so they went out and tried to research this, and they did qualitative research based on focus groups, depth interviews and essays, and the consumers came up with 10 components that they believe define coolness. What they found was original, popular, iconic, extraordinary, energetic, authentic, rebellious, high status, subcultural, and aesthetically pleasing characteristic traits separated a cool brand from an uncool brand. So they further looked into this and they wanted to see this from a quantitative approach. So they told the consumers to pick one brand that they thought was cool and another one they thought was uncool. And they had these consumers rate each brand on the 10 characteristic traits on a scale of 1 to 5, from which they would either strongly disagree to strongly agree. And what they found was that people that strongly agreed with these characteristic traits, that led to positive payoffs for these companies. Positive payoffs would include brand favorability or willingness to pay. The word of mouth was also improved when people agreed with the brand's characteristics. Brand love, people would be more considered to keep buying, its loyalty, and also self-brand connections. People consider themselves a representative of the brand. So they did a test. They wanted to see why coolness is dynamic, changes with time and with trends. And they put coolness into 3 groups. They defined it as uncool, the niche cool, and the mass cool. What the niche cool means is it's cool to enthusiasts. So say your particular like snowboarding brand and you have a certain brand but the entire mass hasn't accepted it, that would be a niche cool. Mass cool is it's generally accepted by the population. So for example, they went on to streetwear, they looked at streetwear and they asked consumers to put them into the 3 categories. And what they found was people put Gap and Skechers into the uncool, while Supreme and Nike were put in the mass cool, and products such as Steady Hand were put into the niche cool, which means that not many people knew about it, but those that were passionate about streetwear, they thought that Steady Hands was the best brand. Also, using the same scale, they found that the outcomes were important in creating word of mouth or purchase intent. They used regressional analysis to see how these characteristics translated to post-purchase decisions. So to create brand coolness, the webinar looks at measuring brands' current level of coolness versus competitors at a component level. So they would look at each 10 components and they'd go out and ask people about their own brand, and they would see where people would rank them in terms of loyalty, in terms of authenticness. And what they found was pretty interesting. For the niche cool, they found that people thought the niche cools were original, authentic, rebellious, subcultural, while the mass cool was popular, iconic, high status, and energetic. So there was a little bit of a trade-off between niche cool and mass cool. And for companies to identify this, they would ask consumers to see where they lacked in terms of the 10 components. For example, Nike wanted to go down the rebellious route, and so they went for the Colin Kaepernick ad, and at the time seen as pretty controversial, but that was how they wanted to make their brand image cool because it was seen as rebellious. So the key for all this is trying to find the marketing mix to increase perception on cool traits. Uh, in conclusion, brands go through a coolness lifestyle. All brands start off as uncool at some point in time, but they start to turn cool when the subculture adopts them, when people that are passionate about a certain product adapt that. And from there, the niche grows to the mass when a group of consumers adopt the brand, not just the enthusiasts. For example, Lululemon, they just used to sell yoga clothes, but once the mass population grabbed onto it, it turned into a whole clothing retail store. Same with Levi's. Levi's used to just appeal to the niche of cowboys and people in the West, and then they kind of moved to a large scale jeans retailer. So it's interesting to see how these brands go from uncool to the niche, and then finally, hopefully for many brands, they're adopted by the general mass population.